Good morning. Welcome to the rally to oppose SB277. Thank you all for showing up today. Woo! We are very fortunate to begin our rally with the Star-Spangled Banner. Right to my right here, I have Alicia Kress. She is a 15-year-old from Campbell, California. She's a freshman from Pioneer Family Academy. I was fortunate enough to hear a video of her singing the other night, and she's phenomenal. So let's give it up for Alicia Kress singing the Star-Spangled Banner.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets spread glare, the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
What a talent. Thank you so much, Alicia. Appreciate that. Well, I'd just like to welcome everyone on behalf of the California Coalition for Health Choice. This group represents a broad group of parents and organizations from up and down the state of California who vehemently oppose this freedom and right stripping bill, SB 277. I thank you all for coming today. I know many of you had long road trips yesterday and actually through the night to make it here this morning. We have people from San Diego, Los Angeles, Bay Area, and many places in between. So thank you all for turning out this morning. And we are going to kick off our program with Eric Gladen. Many of you were at the Crest Theater last night to see his amazing documentary, Trace Amounts. To our legislators, if you have not seen that movie yet, you must see it before you vote on this bill. It is just imperative, critical information that we, the citizens of California, want you to learn about before voting on this bill. And let's see here. Not only, well, Eric is the filmmaker of Trace Amounts, and it is a film that took him almost a decade to make. It began as a result of Eric being mercury poisoned himself by a Tdap vaccine at age 29. So I'm going to, without further ado, introduce Eric and let him tell his story.
Thank you. For those of you who haven't seen the film, you know, I think there's been quite a few headlines out there calling it an anti-vaccine film. And I think, you know, there hasn't been one person that's actually watched the film that comes up and says that. You know, it's very clear, I think, that this really isn't about being pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. This is a much deeper issue, and this is an issue that I take extremely serious. You know, I realized going into this film that there's severe consequences to both sides of the story, and that's pretty much the exact reason why it took me 10 years to make this film, is I knew I had to have it right. I knew I had to have the science right, and, you know, I took that to heart going forward with my research. But I also knew that this was a story that had to be told. You know, this is something that the public isn't aware of. There's much more to the story here. And that's, you know, I would talk to people about this issue and kind of tell them about the science and tell them about my experience and what happened to me. And it just kind of came out like a bunch of gargle, you know. There was no sense to it. There was no pattern to it. There was no rhyme or reason to it. Nobody could understand what I was saying. So that's kind of the reason I put this film together, to really piece this together, show the history of what's happened from 1931 all the way till where we are in 2015 today. So there's something called the Freedom of Information Act that allows you to put in requests for government emails, government documents, and organizations like Safe Minds, individuals like Dr. Brian Hooker have gone after these FOIA requests for years. And what we really want to show in this film, and what we do show in this film for you that saw it last night, was the CDC has figured out the cause, one of the primary causes of autism, and they figured it out in 1999. And we have the documents that show they figured out this major association between the thimerosal preservative, that's a mercury-based preservative, and autism. And then we've also got the transcripts, the closed-door meeting transcripts that show what they did with the data, and their emails to show what they did with the data, to manipulate the results, to get it down to show no association whatsoever. And we've now got Bill Thompson, a CDC senior scientist, who still works for the CDC to this day, validating everything and confirming that the CDC, when they find an association between vaccines and autism, they're put into a room and they manipulate the data until they get that association to go away. Oh. Is that better? So year after year, I'll just speak a little louder. So year after year, we hear the CDC all over the news saying vaccines do not cause autism. The science is the science. The science has been done, and we're moving on to different avenues. And just by doing basic research, you can call their bluff almost instantly. And by doing a little bit more research, you'll see that the science actually shows the exact opposite, and it proves it down to the cell, literally. A lot of the science that you guys saw in my film last night, it's not even the most compelling science. I had to put science in the film that I believe people would understand. I kind of brought it down to a layman term so people could really kind of grasp and absorb a lot of the science. But that's nowhere near the compelling science that exists out there to this day that shows a direct link between thimerosal and neurodevelopmental disorders, not just autism, but tics, speech delays, sleep disorders. I mean, there's a whole array of neurodevelopmental disorders that this is linked to, and the CDC has already found this.
They can't hear him back.
Yeah, I think should I talk louder?
Try that.
Is that better? Can you guys hear me better? Okay. Did you guys hear anything I said, or do I need to start over? So year after year, parents are starting to do the research. They're looking, all this information is readily available. They're finding these documents. They're looking at the scientific studies. The brilliant part of having the internet is people can go to PubMed and look at these published studies and analyze the studies that they claim has ruled thimerosal or vaccines out. And, and year after year, more parents are becoming more concerned with vaccinating their children because they're reading this data. They're reading the published studies. And, the answer isn't now to force them to get these vaccines. That doesn't solve this. The answer is to turn this corrupt system upside down and start restoring faith in the parents, restore their faith in the organizations that are out there supposed to be protecting them. That's the true answer. So, one by one, journalists are watching this film, legislators are watching this film, and the response has been tremendous. I mean, I've got these guys approaching me after the film saying they are just furious. They can't believe what they just saw. They've trusted the CDC. The CDC is who they listen to when they present their science. And they're outright embarrassed because a lot of these journalists have been reporting, this inaccurate information they're given from the CDC and these other government organizations who have vested interest in covering this up. And they're furious, yet they're still scared to talk about it. And Bobby and myself, you'll see a lot of censoring in the media because of this issue. And we're really starting to build a lot of momentum now because we're getting those journalists to look at this. We're getting these journalists to understand the history of what's happened here. And they are literally changing their minds, yet we need enough of them to do this so we can kind of overturn the mainstream media. So the fundamental issue here is not really, in my mind, being pro-vaccine or anti-vaccine. This is a much deeper issue. We've got a system that's broken, a system that's corrupt. We need to restore the faith in the parents to really get to the bottom of this issue, and we need to hit it head on now. So I urge everyone from both sides of this debate. Again, first 3 years I researched this issue. I really went after the science, so I didn't, so I could stop. And if there was a lot of science that disproved this, I could have stopped a long time ago. But that science doesn't exist, and I really urge people from this side, that side, all sides regarding this issue, to watch this film. You can watch it today. You can watch it right now, traceamounts.com. Watch this film, become educated. This is 10 years of research put in a 90-minute film. And I think the entire public needs to watch it in order to protect themselves and their family. So, now I'd just like to introduce the next speaker, who's a friend of mine. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is somebody... I just want to say something really quick before he starts talking. Bobby is somebody who does not have a fight in this fire. He is somebody who started analyzing the science, looked at the science, and couldn't stop looking at the science because it's just so overwhelming that we have a major, major problem here. And this is a guy who I think is a true American hero, doing the right thing, and he's got great things to say, so I'll introduce him.
Thank you, Eric. As Eric said, I got kind of dragged kicking and screaming into this fight, and I got dragged in by a series of extraordinary women who year after year, after I spoke on mercury coming from power plants, would come up to me after my speeches and say, you need to look at the science about mercury in vaccines because it is by far the largest vector for mercury exposure to our children. And I was reluctant to do that because it wasn't really in my wheelhouse, but I'm comfortable reading science. I do that for my job. I've tried hundreds and hundreds of cases. Almost all of them involve scientific questions. And I started looking at this science, and it was so shocking. And then I began calling the other side. I began calling the top people at CDC, Kathleen Stratton, Colleen Doyle, and people like Paul Offit, and asking them to explain the science to me. And when I started listening to them, it didn't make any sense. And I realized that they had nothing to stand on, and the science was the science, and I continued to pursue it. And here I am today, and I'm pro-vaccine. I had six of my kids vaccinated. I think that vaccinations save millions of lives, and that we ought to have policies that encourage full vaccination, full coverage, but that's not going to happen until we have safe vaccines, and until we have a regulatory agency that has integrity and credibility with the American public. And that's what we ought to be focusing on. That's what our government officials ought to be focusing on, is restoring integrity to CDC. And CDC is a very, very troubled agency, and it's not just me saying this. There's been 4 separate scathing federal studies by the United States Congress, a 3-year study by Congressman Burton, a follow-up study by Senator Coburn's committee, another study by the Inspector General in 2008 of HHS, and a study last year by the Office of Research Integrity of HHS, and all of those studies paint a CDC as an absolute cesspool of corruption, as an agency that has fallen under the spell of this trillion-dollar big pharma industry, and instead of serving its primary mission, which is to protect public health, its mission now, according to the federal government, federal studies, is to serve the mercantile interests of vaccine industry. So, and there's 2 areas of corruption in the CDC vaccine division. The first is the division that chooses which vaccines to add to the schedule. Now, when I was a little boy, I got 5 vaccines. My children got the older ones got 22 vaccines. The younger ones got 69 vaccines. And these vaccines keep getting added to the schedule. They began in 1989. The CDC changed the schedule and doubled the amount of mercury in vaccines. They did that because in 1986, the pharmaceutical industry was given by Congress immunity from lawsuits. So it suddenly became very, very profitable to make vaccines, and an industry that once had been kind of a stepchild of big pharma now became one of the profit centers, because they could make a product that the federal government orders 189 people to buy. There's no advertising, there's no marketing, the patents never expired, and you can't be sued. So no matter how badly you make that product, no matter how many defects it has in it, nobody can ever hold you accountable. So they began making these vaccines and adding them to the schedule, and when a pharmaceutical company adds that vaccine to the schedule, the value of it to that company could be as much as $1 billion. And we would expect and we would hope that the advisory committees that make the decision to add new vaccines to that schedule would be independent scientists who have nothing in mind except the safety of our children. But that's not true. What the Inspector General report, and I urge those of you in the press to go look it up, is the 2008 Inspector General of HHS. What they said is that virtually all of the members of those committees have financial entanglements with the vaccine companies. And I'll give you an example. Dr. Paul Offit, who many of you know, who is a vaccine industry tycoon and insider, the principal promoter of vaccines in this country for the vaccine industry, is on the vaccine industry payroll. He, in 1999, sat on the committee that added the rotavirus vaccine to the schedule. At the time, he was working on his own rotavirus vaccine. That opening that gateway by adding that vaccine to the schedule made his patent extremely valuable. And 6 years later, he sold that patent for $182 million and pocketed about $40 million himself. So that kind of financial entanglement by the people who are deciding what vaccines to add to the schedule makes it difficult, I think, for all of us to believe that the only thing that they're thinking of is our children's health. And what the Inspector General report said is that 97% of the people who sit on those panels have the same kind of financial entanglements and conflicts of interest as did Paul Offit. So there are now 16 vaccines, 69 shots, inoculations that our children get. There are 271 new vaccines in the bureaucratic pipeline at CDC waiting approval, and in all likelihood will ultimately be added to the schedule. And Paul Offit says that he believes that it's blue sky for Wall Street after that, because he has said publicly that he thinks children can take as many as 10,000 vaccines. Oh, and when you go to these vaccine committee hearings, it's not a bunch of scientists in white lab suits. It's a bunch of Wall Street analysts in suits. And as soon as that decision is made, they run out of the room and get on their cell phones, and you can watch that stock price spike. So these are financial decisions. They're being driven by a $1 trillion industry, and we need to restore the integrity of that agency. Now, the other part of the vaccine division, the other is the immunology safety division, which are the scientists who are charged with making sure that our vaccines are safe and efficacious. But what we now know, what we've known for years from looking at the science and the phony epidemiological studies that they produce, we've known for years that this division is extremely corrupt. But what we now know, because the senior scientist at CDC, the 17-year veteran, Dr. William Thompson, whose name is the lead author on the most important of those studies, has now in August invoked whistleblower status, federal whistleblower protection, and has hired Morgan Verkamp, one of the leading whistleblower attorney in our country, and has said publicly that CDC, as Eric said, that what they do in that the CDC scientists in that division have been required by their bosses for at least a decade to lie, to manipulate, to massage data, and to bury data that connect neurological disorders, including autism, to thimerosal exposure and to vaccines. So we need, and he has turned over tens of thousands of pages of documents to Congress, and at this point, what we need is Congress to do those hearings. He wants to be subpoenaed and to testify so that the American public, so the American press will finally have to begin covering something that we have known about for a decade. And now, here's the problem, is that all of the checks and balances in our society that normally would protect children from a rapacious industry have been neutralized. As we've said, the pharmaceutical industry is now one of the biggest industries in the world. It's a $1 trillion industry. And it is the #1 lobbyist in Washington, D.C. and the state capitals. $2.6 billion. It gives twice what oil and gas gives to our political leaders. They have become indentured servants for this industry. It gives 4 times, a reporter said to me last night, yeah, it's like the military-industrial complex. And I said, it's worse. The pharmaceutical industry gives 4 times to our politicians to lobbying, gives 4 times to lobbying what defense and aeronautic contractors do. So this is an industry that has complete possession of our politicians on Capitol Hill. So the politicians are now no longer protecting the public. The regulatory agency has become captured by the industry it's supposed to regulate. CDC is now a sock puppet for the pharmaceutical industry and is representing the mercantile interests of that industry, promoting that rather than our public health as their primary priority. The lawyers and the courts that would also form a barrier, a check and balance against the power of this very, very wealthy industry are also gone, because the pharmaceutical industry has used its political clout on Capitol Hill to get laws passed to make it illegal for people who've been injured by vaccines to sue the company that injured them. So there's no discovery, there's no depositions, there's no document searches. You can go to the vaccine court, which is essentially a secret court that doesn't advertise. Even the vaccine court estimates that it's so little known that less than 10% of the people who are injured by vaccines and could make claims ever show up there. And when you get there, you're not suing the industry that poisoned you. You're suing the federal government. And nevertheless, they paid out $3 billion to thousands and thousands of people, who've been injured by the vaccine. So you have the politicians that have been neutralized, you have the regulatory agency neutralized, you have the courts and the lawyers gone. What's left? The press. Well, the pharmaceutical industry is the single biggest advertiser on television, radio, and newspapers. They get between $3.4 and $5.6 billion a year in advertising. They are now the #1 advertiser on network news. So you will not see a network news show covering this issue honestly, ever. And you guys all know that. Right. And there's this kind of Kafkaesque censorship in the news about having a reasonable debate about this issue, a fact-based debate. So instead, we hear a lot of name-calling. We hear people, because they can't debate us on the merits, so they call us anti-vaccine, they call us hysterical, they call us conspiracy theorists. And I want people to think, when they use that term anti-vax, parents, they should be thinking of a parent with a disabled child, because that's who these people are. I want to say one other thing. This is this movement that calls you anti-vax is the most misogynistic movement that I have seen in my lifetime. It is a movement that is anti-mother and it is anti-woman. Yes. And the names that I hear coming out of people's mouths about hysterics and refrigerator moms and all of this in our major newspapers like the New York Times is extraordinary. And these women, I want to say something about them before I sit down. I was raised around extraordinary women. My grandmother, Rose Kennedy, who was the mother of 3 senators and the mother of a president. My aunt, Eunice Shriver, who started Special Olympics. My mother, and many, many others. But I have never met women like the ones that I've met in this movement. They are articulate, they're eloquent, they're pharmacists, they're doctors, they're lawyers. read the science. They know what they have read the science. They know what the science said. They can destroy any of these politicians if they were given the ability to debate. They are never given that forum. They are doubly traumatized because they go home to a child who is, and the CDC is up there saying, oh, well, we don't know if this is an epidemic. They will not call it an epidemic. They will not call it a crisis. They call it a health concern, a serious health concern. So, and they say, well, maybe we're just noticing kids who are this sick, and that for the first time, but that they are, that they've been around all the time. And I would ask you, where is this population of adults that is wearing football helmets and diapers, and that is nonverbal? They don't exist. They don't exist in the 30-year-old cohort. They only exist in our children. And they're in school now, and they're costing this country $400 billion a year, and they're about to hit our social safety nets, and they're going to collapse it. And it's going to become a concern for all Americans now then. I'm sorry. But anyway, and these women and these parents are traumatized by what happened to their children. They're people who are bankrupted. They have a 75% divorce rate. They can't go out at night. They can't leave their child with a babysitter. They are tied at home, and they don't have time for politics, and they have been politically invisible until this moment. But now they're coming out because they see another threat that they are going to be triply traumatized. They're traumatized by what happened to their child. They're traumatized by the doctors and the public health organizations and the press who told them that what they saw isn't true. What they know to be true is not true. And they've been dismissed, and now they're being told that no matter what happens, no matter what they know about their child's health, that all of the barriers between that pharmaceutical company and them are now being taken away, and now they're going to remove the mother from the equation as well. So, and that's what this is about. Well, let me repeat that. All of the barriers that are meant to protect our children, the government, the lawyers, the regulatory agency, and the press, the checks and balances in our democratic system that are supposed to stand between corporate power and our little children have been removed. And there's only one barrier left, and that's the parents. And we need to keep them in the equation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kennedy. A rousing speech with great information. I'm going to mess with the microphone for just a minute here. Can you guys hear it better in the back now? Okay, my future speakers speak. Basically, you need to kiss the microphone, get very close to it. So our next speaker is Dr. Bob Sears. From the round of applause, you can tell he's a beloved pediatrician here in California. Dr. Sears practices in Dana Point, California. He's a graduate of the Georgetown University School of Medicine, and he received his pediatric training at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. He's the author of The Vaccine Book and other works which can be found in the Sears Parenting Library. He is a medical advisor for TACA, which stands for Talk About Curing Autism, and also for La Leche League International. He writes his Dr. Bob's daily blog on his Dr. Bob Sears Facebook page. He's a champion of parental rights, including with regards to making vaccination decisions for one's children. He believes in prior, voluntary, and informed consent, the hallmark of ethical medicine, and for that, we applaud him.
All right. Okay. Hey, you guys. Thanks for coming out today. It's totally awesome to see everyone. I'm glad I get to be the first person to really kiss the mic. Sorry for everyone who's coming after me. So you guys, I just want to give you a little bit of encouragement. I mean, I'm a pediatrician in my office. I give vaccines every day in my office. I give them more carefully. I give them slowly, more gradually. I don't overload kids with so many vaccines at once. But most importantly, I give my patients a choice. And I feel an ethical obligation as a doctor to sit down with each one of my patients and give them informed consent. It's critical. I swore an oath in medicine to give my patients informed consent for every medical treatment, and vaccines are no exception. And that's a right that the American Medical Association puts out there, and I think every doctor would agree that everyone should have informed consent. So as you talk to people about this, it's not about are vaccines good or bad, are vaccines safe, or are they dangerous? This bill, in my mind, isn't really about that. It's about one thing, informed consent, and you guys have the right as parents to make that decision. And as a doctor, I just consider it completely unethical to make any medical treatment mandatory, or to hold the threat that your children can't attend public school, can't attend childcare, your special needs children can't go to a facility and get therapy and with other children around. You'll be deprived of all of that if this bill passes. And so get out there, and let me just give you one little word of encouragement. We know the health committee is voting on this today. And we know that there's a pretty good chance that this bill will pass in today's meeting. This is only one of many meetings to come and a long fight to come. So if the bill passes today, you guys, don't lose hope, don't get discouraged. We have 2 more committee meetings. The education committee, there's 8 members there, and only 2 of them are co-signers on the bill. So they have to convince at least 3 other members of the education committee to pass this bill forward. So that's maybe where you can put your effort in this whole week. Education committee, you guys, look up those senators, and if you live in a district with one of those senators, you gotta meet with them this week and next week, all right? And then judiciary after that. But even if it goes through all 3 committees, you guys, the fight is not over. You gotta speak out, because it's not gonna be an easy task to get it through the entire Senate. And that's where the fight will continue. So don't be discouraged, you guys. Get out there and keep your voices going. Make calls, faxes, emails, send letters, and show up personally. And when you get home, do the same thing in your local district offices, all right? So you know what? Again, thanks for coming out. And I didn't want to speak for too long because there's a lot of us that want to get out here and talk. But you guys, it's great to see such a wonderful crowd, and get out there and fight for your rights.
Next, I'd like to introduce Karen Kain. Karen Kain is the mother of Lauren Kain, who was vaccine injured at a mere 6 weeks of age in 1994. The DTP vaccine caused Lauren to suffer severe brain damage, constant seizures, and blindness, which led Karen to file a claim with the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. She won, so to speak, with the case ending in a settlement in 1998, which included compensation by the VICP. Karen travels around the U.S. talking to families of unique children. She wrote a book about her journey called A Unique Life Fully Lived. Karen shares her story to encourage all parents to take the time to educate themselves prior to vaccinating their children. I welcome my friend and colleague, Karen Kain. Okay, here we go. Can everybody hear me? Right on. First of all, I want to say what an honor it is to be here today. People often People often call me an anti-vaxxer, and that's just not true. I did everything right. I did everything right, and I believed in vaccines. When Lauren was 6 weeks old, I took her in and gave her her one and only DPT vaccination. And that was on April 27th, 1994. That was only 21 years ago. 2 hours after Lauren's vaccine, she had a 5-minute tonic-clonic seizure. 2 hours after that, she had another 5-minute tonic-clonic seizure. And on that day, my life was stolen from me. Lauren had seizures every day for the rest of her life, often lasting 5 minutes or longer. 30 kids had seizures or worse with the same lot that my daughter had. There were 10 surrounding deaths with the same lot that Lauren received. Lauren's vaccine was filled with mercury, and it had destroyed her brain. She had what is called a hot lot. The government makes it perfectly legal for the drug manufacturers to scatter the lots when they mail their vaccines out. So Lauren's vaccine was scattered throughout the United States. Her vaccine was given in Newport Beach, but children were injured all over the US, in Hawaii and Ohio, all over. And that's perfectly legal to do, so that not one doctor's office sees numerous injuries. The government never disputed the cause of injury for my daughter. They immediately said yes, she was vaccine injured. So my family is considered to be lucky. And I just want to ask, if you are a vaccine injured family, will you please raise your hand?
Look around.
Yeah, look around.
Look around.
Some of you need more than one hand, because a lot of families that I meet now have more than one child that's injured by their vaccination. I also get phone calls all the time. I gave my child the vaccine and they died. The doctors never said anything, so I gave my second child a vaccination and they also died. Back in 1994, there was no internet. I was completely isolated and alone. No one talked about vaccine injury. Even though the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program immediately agreed that my daughter was vaccine injured, they went into the hospital the first time we met and they tried to prove that I was a bad parent. They stripped my daughter down looking for bed sores. They were doing everything they could to prove that I was not taking care of my daughter, even though I was living in ICU at the time. My baby never got her day in court. Back then, I had no idea that we were being hidden. She didn't get a judge and jury because in vaccine court, as many of you know, families do not get a judge and jury because nobody wants to see my little girl stroll in a wheelchair on oxygen being fed through a feeding tube in court, because then people would know what's happening to our babies. There's also no compensation for the parents. Once we settled with the vaccine injury court, I was basically, every single dime I ever spent, I had to prove the court that I was doing the right thing for my child. And then there's survival. My family was devastated. As many of you families already know this. In 1 year alone, I spent 171 days in ICU with my daughter. I never left her side. Lauren had 13 different surgeries during her lifetime and countless, endless procedures. She took throughout her entire life at least 6 anti-seizure medications, continuing to have uncontrolled seizures. To no surprise, her father and I divorced. Throughout Lauren's life, she was fed through a feeding tube. She never walked, she never talked, she was cortically blind,
Her brain just was not interpreting what her eyes were seeing. There was nothing wrong with her eyes. She was a quadriplegic, meaning she had no purposeful movement of her arms or her legs. She never spoke with words, but Lauren was quite magical. She constantly visited people in their dreams. She was a very powerful young lady. Her body was a train wreck. It was very clear for anyone to see, but her spirit was powerful. It's important that you all understand that Lauren was loved. She had friends. She was the most courageous person I have ever met. She happened to be beautiful. She had a wicked sense of humor. She loved chocolate. She loved shopping. We had tons of sleepovers, and she was loved. And the funny thing was that even with her multiple disabilities, people felt safe around her because she just exuded love. She loved God, and her life was important. The sad truth today is that our babies are sick. The CDC states that 54% of our children have chronic illness. The U.S. has the highest vaccination rate, and we also have the highest infant mortality rate. 2.4% of our children have deadly allergies. And the vaccines, as you know, are filled with mercury and aluminum, formaldehyde, aborted fetal tissue, and I could go on and on. The Center of Disease Control announced last year that 1 in 68 children has autism. But the true statistics extrapolated out is 1 in 18 of 2-year-olds has autism. We as a people should be outraged. And if we do nothing by 2025, 1 in 2 of our children will have autism. Where there is risk, there must be choice. I know that I'm not alone, and many of you here today have shared your vaccine story to others just to help save a child. Your families have been ripped apart, and people have turned their backs on you. I fully understand. I'm honored to stand here today, shoulder to shoulder with each of you, as we stand up for our children and our American rights. We are not going away, and our voices will be heard. It is my commitment in my daughter's name to do all that I can to support families of vaccine-injured children and do my best to stop this from happening to one more family. It is so important that we see both sides of this vaccine debate. This is not only a vaccine issue, it's a health, a human rights, a libertarian issue, and it's our God-given right to choose what we put into our babies. Our children who have lived and died with vaccine injury will never be forgotten. Please join me as we go forward to stop SB277 and bills like it from our very scary reality. Thank you so much for coming out today. And as many people have already said, our work is just beginning. Let's tell our stories. I know I receive all kinds of notes from people saying, thank you for being brave. I'm not brave. I think my daughter was the brave one. I think our children are the brave one. And I do this work because it's the right thing to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen, for sharing the story of your daughter Lauren with us. One thing Karen said that I just want to reiterate is She mentioned that vaccines can be shipped in separated lots. No other drug can legally be shipped that way, only vaccines. Makes you wonder. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Brian Stenzler. He received his doctorate of chiropractic degree from Life University in 1998, followed by a master's degree in sports health science from Life University in 1999. He enjoys providing wellness and lifestyle coaching and consulting for businesses around the globe, in addition to helping patients at his dream wellness centers in both Pacific Beach and Del Mar, California. Since June 2014, he has been serving as president of the California Chiropractic Association, known as CCA, serving chiropractors throughout California. We applaud Dr. Stenzler and the CCA for the support they have provided in helping to preserve vaccine choice rights here in California.
I always ask for a lower podium, but they don't do that for me. So, California Chiropractic Association vaccine, what do vaccines have to do with chiropractic, people ask me? The answer is nothing. So why have we stepped up and decided to fight this? Because somebody had to. God damn it. All these other organizations out there, they've just been waiting on the sidelines, waiting to see what everyone else can do. And the CCA stepped up and imposed this bill before it was even in print. And we had Senator Pan meet with us, and we told him we are not going to let this go easy. Why are we so passionate about this? I'll tell you why. Chiropractors get into chiropractic because we don't want to be medical doctors, because we choose a natural health option that does not require pharmaceuticals all the time, and that's what our patients want also. Why am I so passionate about this? Because I'm tired of seeing these kids come to my office and my colleagues' offices with all these injuries, neurological impairments, and their parents say they never had this before the vaccines. I could not remain quiet, neither could my friends anymore. I want to make it clear the CCA does not have a position on vaccines, but it has a strong position on informed consent and choice. There is no healthcare procedure in this country that should ever be administered to anybody without informed consent. You take that away, you take the rights away, you take all our freedoms away. That is not acceptable. I urge each and every one of you to continue meeting with your legislators and other people even beyond this. Even if and when we kill this bill, we talk about natural forms of immunity. One of my favorite signs right there, force my veggies, not vaccines. How arrogant to think that the only way of immunization is through pharmaceuticals. What about healthy living? What about fully functioning nerve systems? What about exercise? Do you think that these parents are so dumb who choose not to vaccinate that they're going to leave their kids out bulletproof without any type of way of building natural immunity? Why is it that a lot of the no vaccine parents, why are they higher educated and higher socioeconomic? Is it because they're just too stubborn, they're too snobby? Or maybe they're smarter and they're tired of hearing this and they're not going to fit into the status quo? And I'd say it looked like 80% of you have families or children that were injured by vaccines, and that does not need to happen anymore. And I'm so grateful that every one of you have come out here, and the CCA is going to continue to fight this. We're going to fight tooth and nail until this is gone, and we're going to work on changing a culture of healthcare so people know that immunization does not have to come from a needle. And the next time a medical doctor says that we're going to vaccinate your child, you ask them to give you a note saying you can guarantee that there is no chance of anything bad happening. They will not give you that note. And why won't they give you that note? Because there's an inherent risk. And when there's a risk, there must be a choice. Thank you.
He is ahead of his peers in understanding the true history of vaccines, the harm they have caused and continue to cause, the corruption that continues to drive their ever-increasing use, and how to treat those injured and disabled by vaccines. His patients love him and appreciate his dedication and care. Please, let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Ken Stoller.
I was a board-certified pediatrician. I resigned from the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2008. I resigned out of protest for their support of thimerosal in 1999, along with the Public Health Service, because they got wind of the fact that the CDC had figured out there was a link between thimerosal and a lot of neurodevelopmental problems, including autism. They got wind of this and they decided to be proactive and announced with the Public Health Service that they were supportive of having thimerosal removed from all vaccines. All they did was 10 years later protest the television show Eli Stone when it came out and had an episode that was negative against thimerosal. So I wrote them a letter, an open letter, and I resigned. Now I want to take you back to 1959 when I was 4 years old and at the little girl across the street's birthday party, and I developed acute flaccid paralysis. It didn't last very long, but I went to medical school hoping I would figure out what happened to me, because I never found out what happened to me. Total paralysis from the waist down. And it wasn't until just a few years ago when I was having dinner with my mom's friend, someone who developed polio when they were going to UCLA, and I compared notes with this man. And then I turned to my mom and I said, "Did I get a polio vaccine anywhere near that little girl's birthday party?" She said, "Yeah, 2 weeks before." And I went, "Oh my God, I got polio from the polio vaccine when I was 4 years old." Those vaccines were contaminated. They were contaminated with the SV40 virus. And if you are a virus, if you are a cancer-causing animal virus, the best way to get ignored by the Centers for Disease Control is to find yourself as a contaminant in a vaccine. You will have it made in the shade. So today, there are retroviruses of all types contaminating vaccines. In a rotavirus vaccine, there is 10 times more porcine retrovirus in that vaccine than the antigen for the rotavirus itself. So these are dirty, dirty medical interventions. And the pharmaceutical companies have absolutely no incentive to clean up their act, to follow strict guidelines. They don't care. They have no liability. They have, this is the best thing that can happen for them. And if you eliminate parental choice, all checks and balances have been removed, and medical tyranny will be here. So this is very, very important that we retain the right to say no to a very dirty and primitive medical intervention. The Infectious Disease Division of the CDC has been completely bled out by the pharmaceutical companies. And in 2006, when I was called to testify in front of a congressional hearing, Dan Burton's committee, I was pulled aside and told everybody in the higher echelons of our government know that vaccines are causing autism. They already know. This is about cover-up. This is about corruption at the highest levels. This is about greed. This is about fratricide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stoller. We're going to take a 2-minute intermission and see if we can get this sound system working better. So please don't leave. We've got a sound person who's going to come up and see what he can do. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Thanks for coming today, everyone, especially those of you that made a really long journey. We decided that we can't have the MC introduce herself, so I'm going to take over emceeing for just a minute and introduce my dear friend and colleague, Laura Hayes. Laura and her husband have 3 children, all of whom suffered some level of vaccine injury, one to the point of severe and permanent disability. She is passionate about educating others about the dangers and inefficacies of vaccines and about the corruption behind them. She is an active member of a local organization named Families for Early Autism Treatment, and she and her husband are co-founders of the UC Davis Mind Institute here in Sacramento. She and I fought side by side against AB 2109 just a few short years ago, and here we are again, fighting once more to protect parental rights and medical choice freedom here in California. Please welcome my dear friend and colleague, Laura Hayes.
Today marks a sad day in the history of California. Today is a day where we have had to come from near and far to oppose medical tyranny and to fight for what is rightfully ours, the right to decide what we allow into our bodies and the bodies of our children. Our right is under fierce attack by the very people we elected to protect our rights. If the right to decide what goes into our bodies and those of our children is wrongfully taken from us, what meaningful rights do we have? How did we arrive at this place in time where if SB277 becomes law, police will be required to forcibly take our children against our will to be force vaccinated with scores of vaccines by doctors and nurses who have sworn to first do no harm, and who are ethically and legally required to obtain prior, voluntary, and informed consent before any and all medical procedures, including vaccination. How has it come to this? I will tell you how. It begins with lies. Lies that vaccines are miraculously safe and effective for all, unlike any other drug or medical procedure, which is especially unbelievable as there are well over 100 of them. Lies that vaccines are solely responsible for eradicating certain diseases. Lies that vaccines have been properly tested, both individually and in the combinations in which they're administered. Lies that pharmaceutical companies don't have corrupt influence over government regulators. Lies that vaccine research is without fraud. Lies that fraudulent vaccine research is true. Lies that toxic vaccine ingredients are safe. Lies denying cover-ups of the causal links between vaccines and the endless list of conditions now crippling the health, development, and well-being of our children. Lies that informed consent is taking place before vaccination. Lies that someone is actually monitoring our nation's children post-vaccination. Lies that side effects, injuries, and deaths are tracked. Lies that our nation has a program in place that takes care of the vaccine injured. Lies that even though no doctor and no company is liable for vaccine injuries and vaccine deaths, safety remains a priority. Lies that doctors admit and report vaccine injuries, deaths, and failures. Lies that pharmaceutical companies tell the truth. Lies that pharmaceutical companies behave ethically when it comes to vaccines, despite multi-million and multi-billion-dollar lawsuits won against them for fraud and deception year in and year out. Lies that vaccine injury is rare. Let's have a showing one more time if you have at least one vaccine-injured child. That does not look rare to me. Lies that vaccines don't harm and don't kill. Lies that vaccines never cause autism. and also don't cause seizure disorders, learning and behavioral disorders, asthma, life-threatening food allergies, tics, SIDS, cancer, type 1 diabetes, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, paralysis, and more. That lengthy list reminds me of the saying, vaccines, the leading cause of coincidences in the world. Lies, lies, and more lies. That is how we have arrived at this day today, where our legislators think they have the right to disregard and undo the Constitution, the right to ignore that which our country was founded upon, religious freedom, specifically the freedom to think, believe, and practice in our own way. The right to defy international codes of ethics, such as the Nuremberg Code, which prohibits forced medical treatments and procedures of any kind, including vaccination. Our legislators also seem to think they have the right to violate sacred, God-given parental rights and the right to insist that millions of parents all submit to a one-size-fits-all prescription. Make that scores of prescriptions, which have a long, undeniable history of harming, disabling, and killing. We must ask these legislators, what constitutional powers have been bestowed upon you to mandate that I must inject my child with known neurotoxins, known carcinogens, ingredients proven to disrupt and destroy both the nervous and immune systems, ingredients that will destroy my child's gut and gastrointestinal tract, ingredients that you, senators and assembly members, wouldn't allow in your morning cup of coffee, but that we must inject into our children? What legal or moral authority gives you the right to mandate that I must allow risky medical procedures for my child numerous times over the course of 18 years, procedures that have the very real potential to cause great harm, grave injury, permanent disability, and death? You don't have the right, and you don't have the authority to order parents to play medical Russian roulette with their children. I would like to address the recurrent mention that all must be vaccinated to protect the immunocompromised. The elephant in the room that refuses to be acknowledged is how and why do we have so many children and young adults today who are classified as immunocompromised? Could it be that the very vaccines they received, possibly beginning in utero and subsequently on the day of birth and at regular intervals thereafter, when their blood-brain barriers were wide open and their immune systems were undeveloped and unable to handle the barrage of toxins and viruses contained in vaccines, could it be that they are immunocompromised due to the vaccines they received? And now legislators propose to mandate that other children be forced vaccinated until everyone is ill beyond repair? Furthermore, for the children who are seriously immunocompromised, going out in public is a danger to them, and their parents must decide if they need to be kept at home until re-entry into social settings is possible. Vaccinating all children in the state of California will not protect them. There will always be diseases circulating to which they will be exposed, including the common cold. There will always be those for whom vaccines don't work. There will always be those whose temporary, partial, and artificial vaccine-induced immunity has waned and is no longer present. There will always be those who just received live virus vaccines who are actually contagious, shedding and spreading the very diseases against which they were vaccinated. There will always be a risk for those who are immunocompromised. There is always a risk for everyone. That does not mean that others should be forced to endure risk to supposedly protect them. Furthermore, that is not the government's decision to make. Risk-benefit healthcare decisions must be made for children by their parents who know them best, who know their present health status, who know the child's family history, and who know there are many, many ways to protect, maintain, and enhance their child's health. Risk-free ways without risk-laden vaccines. It is the responsibility of all parents of immunocompromised children to take the needed measures to protect their children. It is not the responsibility of other children, most especially if it could mean chronic illness, permanent disability, and death for those children. It is no one's right to put themselves in the position of valuing one child's life over another's. I am the mother of a severely vaccine-injured child who is now 21 years old. He is a boy in a man's body, fully dependent on others. He did not complete high school or go to college. He is not capable of earning a living or living independently. He will never get married, never have children. As a matter of fact, my son Ryan will never even go out on a first date. He was robbed of ever living a typical and independent life because he was poisoned and disabled by vaccines beginning in 1994, continuing through 1998. There was no informed consent, no acknowledgement of his loss of skills and development of strange behaviors after every single set of vaccines. There was no admitting that he received a minimum of 237.5 micrograms of neurotoxic mercury and neurotoxic aluminum and formaldehyde and antifreeze and animal cells and viruses and allergy-causing food proteins and known carcinogens. No government agent has followed up on his vaccine injuries, so the same thing won't happen to other children. He is one of the unacknowledged, uncounted, uncompensated, ignored, discounted, and publicly denied victims who make up the ever-increasing epidemic of vaccine-injured persons. There is indeed an urgent public health crisis sweeping the country, and it is not measles, mumps, or chicken pox. It is vaccine injury. Vaccine injury is the public health crisis facing us today. Thank you all for coming here today to help end this vaccine madness, this medical fascism, this oppressive tyranny, this present evil. Because there is risk, there must be choice, parental choice. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Victoria Ikerd-Schreiter. Victoria is legal. Her reputation precedes her. Victoria is legal counsel for the California Coalition for Health Choice. Since the disability diagnosis of her first child, who was vaccine injured, Victoria has tirelessly advocated for the needs of both of her injured children in their struggle to overcome their disabilities, in addition to all children on the local, state, national, and global level as well. Victoria has worked within agencies and nonprofits to learn their systems and processes and advocated within them as an agent of change. Now, as an attorney, she advocates against those very same entities while still building allies for the needs and rights of children with disabilities. Victoria advocates on a policy level to maintain the services that serve to bring equality to adults and children with special needs. She served on many task forces and other things, and her legacy has been the creation and continuation of the annual binational Spanish Conference on Autism. We welcome Victoria.
We are all here today for a common cause, to raise our voices and remind California that we want our freedom. Freedom from the tyranny of government-mandated medical procedures. Freedom from every oppression, every injustice, like the one that had taken the bodies and the minds and even the lives of our infant babies. The freedom to choose whether we want to risk our tiny, little, sweet, innocent, and beautiful babies, some just 1 day old, for the greater good by injecting them with a chemical riddled with impropriety, corruption, conflict of interest, all for the almighty dollar, into tiny little immune systems that all science tells us their bodies have no way to fight or prepare for. The United States Supreme Court ruled vaccines to be unavoidably unsafe. But this decision was not made to heed a warning to you or I. To all Americans, for the risk of neurological harm, the risk of permanent autoimmune damage, the real risk of death. Risk of death much higher from vaccines today than from the diseases themselves that they claim to protect us from. This decision, this ruling, this legal framework, unavoidably unsafe, was found for one sinister purpose: to finally and ultimately lay to rest the question of liability, to give full immunity to the manufacturers of the vaccines forever being sued for damages, for the harm that their injections could cause to our babies. This decision was designed to take away our freedom, to hold them accountable, and give them the freedom to never, ever have to make vaccines safe again. In California, it was found by our California Supreme Court that our state constitution gave all children the fundamental right to a free public education. The United States Supreme Court found that our children with special needs, our vaccine-injured children are included in that group, have a constitutionally protected right to a free, appropriate public education. So this fundamental right of access to public education exists regardless of race, creed, or religion. In 1971, the California Supreme Court held, "We further the cherished idea of American education, that in a democratic society, free public school shall be made available to all children, equally the abundant gift of learning. But in order for our children, our California children, to be allowed to first enroll our children for the school year, we must provide proof of all vaccinations on schedule. Therefore, the personal belief exemption that SB 277, that Kain, and that the legislator now want to take from us, this exemption holds our right to access to public education. This is an entitlement. This is our property right that they're trying to take away with SB 277. We must maintain our parental choice of informed consent while still allowing every child, our children, the freedom to attend public schools. So these legislators took an oath of office during their inauguration. They swore to protect and uphold the United States Constitution. They swore to protect and uphold the California Constitution. And they swore to protect and uphold the rights and freedoms of California citizens. John F. Kennedy once said, "The cost of freedom is always high, but Americans have always paid it." And one path that we shall never choose, and that is the path of surrender or submission. We therefore today cannot surrender or ever give up. We must remind them of their pledge, their oath to our children and to us, that they must not, and that they swore not to take away those rights. This exemption, this entitlement, this is our right to freedom. Our children, our choice. Our children, our choice. Our children, our choice. Our children, our choice.
Thank you, Victoria. Next up, we have Dawn Winkler. Dawn is the, let's give it up for Dawn. We all know who Dawn is. Give her a round of applause. Dawn is the former California State Co-Director for the National Vaccine Information Center, the former Director of California Vaccine Awareness, and the former Vice President of Concerned Parents for Vaccine Safety. Presently, she's the Executive Director of Health Advocacy in the Public Interest. She has worn many important hats over the years as she has battled hard to maintain parental rights and health freedom, with a special emphasis on maintaining vaccine choice rights. Her passion and advocacy are fueled by the fact that she is the mother of a beloved daughter who was killed by her government-mandated vaccines as an infant. Dawn is a strong and tireless advocate, a genuine seeker of truth, and an inspiration and mentor to her colleagues. She helped lead the charge against AB 2109, likes to joke that she is still standing after that, and is here today to help defeat SB 277. I welcome my very dear friend and colleague, Dawn Winkler.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for that warm welcome. Thanks, everybody, for being here again. The Constitution of this republic should make special provision for medical freedom. To restrict the art of healing to one class will constitute the Bastille of medical science. All such laws are un-American and despotic. Unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship and force people who wish doctors and treatments of their own choice to submit to only what the dictating outfit offers. The Constitution of the Republic should make a special provision for medical freedoms as well as religious freedom. This is attributed to Dr. Benjamin Rush, physician, medical professor, and early Surgeon General to all Continental armies, as well as signer of the Declaration of Independence. 225 years later, I am horrified to stand before you here today as we stand together having to fight for what should be a fundamental, basic human right. It is an utter shame that Dr. Rush's words of wisdom were not heeded all those years ago. Despite insisting that this was not his goal or the goal of AB 2109 to take away our right to opt out of one or more vaccines for our children, here we all are in 2015 fighting for that very right. This is indeed what Richard Pan wanted all along. Why does Richard Pan think that he should be the pediatrician to all children of California? I was one of those parents, one of those who vaccinated my child on time, every time. The immunize on time, every time bulletin board, billboard, was a total success with me. I even had an attitude against those parents who would dare not vaccinate their children. I made sure my daughter received her vaccines on time, every time. No one would listen to me, however, not a single time, any time, when my daughter had problems following her vaccinations. I was told that her eczema was normal, her overnight allergy to dairy was normal, her all-over body rash was normal, her dilated pupils completely drowning out the beautiful blue color of her eyes, making them black, was normal. Her staring into space to the point of not being able to get her attention was normal. I would learn far too late that this was actually a type of seizure. I was told that I was just a hysterical first-time mom, that she was fine, normal, and not to worry. I found my daughter dead in her crib on the night of July 17th, 1995, just before midnight on my grandmother's birthday. We had just been to visit her earlier that day. Haley received well over 272 times the limit of mercury via her vaccines that is considered safe to ingest, not inject, by the FDA. The symptoms that she suffered for months prior to her death were all classic mercury poisoning symptoms. And I want to be absolutely clear, mercury is not the only problem with vaccines. Her death was labeled SIDS. I know her death was vaccine-induced. I know. I'm her mother. No matter, thank you. No matter the label, my daughter did not die fast enough to qualify for the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. My daughter, too, is one of the countless, uncounted, uncompensated, inconsequential, overlooked, disregarded vaccine victims. My life and the lives of those around me have been forever changed in ways that I could never describe to you, no matter how long I spent or how hard I tried. She would be 20 years old if she were here today. As I left my house today and got about 10 miles down the road, I realized, number one, I'm going to be late, I can't turn around, and that I had forgotten my daughter's portrait that I wanted to hold up in the hearing today. And then standing on the stairs over there, looking out into the crowd, suddenly I see, there's my daughter. Nancy, would you come over here? I just met Nancy today, and this is my daughter, Haley Lynn, 5.5 months old when she passed away. And I have to say, I just was overcome with joy to see my daughter's picture when I left my house and forgot it. So I just wanted to share that. Thanks for coming up. Stay here if you want. For the past 18 years, I have had one avenue by which to protect my son from vaccine injury or possibly the same fate as his sister: the personal beliefs exemption from vaccination. And now this basic freedom hangs in the balance. I honestly did not think that we would get to this point as a nation, but Dr. Benjamin Rush saw it coming 225 years ago. It is horrifying, infuriating, surreal, and an embarrassment to both the state of California and to our nation. The United Kingdom fought for more than 60 years before finally ending compulsory vaccination. They have enjoyed a statutory exemption from vaccination for the past 117 years. 6 years prior to their victory in 1892, J.N.O. Pickering wrote, "Medical men have attributed to vaccination that which was due entirely to sanitation, and the public mind accepted that conclusion without proper inquiry. And here we are, after nearly 100 years' experience, still battling with a myth which is now mania." Sound familiar? And the members of the faculty who ought to know the most are the last to surrender an observance which is unparalleled for its brutality and its fatality. I would strongly agree with Laura Hayes, our MC, previous speaker, dear friend and colleague. Vaccine injury is today's public health crisis, not measles. If I could ask our California legislators just one thing today, it would be this: please treat us like fellow human beings, not a herd. Your job is to protect our rights, not to trample or impede them. Because there is risk, there must be choice. Thank you.
Okay, try that again. Thank you, Dawn, for your powerful words and your history lesson. Next up, we have Christie Dames. Christie is both an accomplished businesswoman and a health freedom activist. As a connector and cross-pollinator of people and ideas and CEO of Tech Talk Studio, Christie bridges the worlds of business, technology, design, and chronic disease prevention with a mission to help rebuild a healthy world for healthy beings, bringing the voices and stories of moms and dads of health-compromised kids out to the world. I had the pleasure of seeing Christie speak when Assemblymember Mark Levine hosted a meeting a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden I saw her on our speaker list and just am thrilled to introduce her and have her here today. Let's welcome Christie.
Well, this is absolutely unbelievable. You know, I don't have autism. I don't have a child with autism. I don't even have any children. But I have found through my own pathway to you and your families and your children and what's happening. Like Eric Gladen, I had to find my own answers for what had happened to me years ago. And in doing so, I knew I had to go back to my childhood and understand what had happened. How could I put these pieces together? What possibly could have led to so many of the challenges I had had in my life? And when I did, I arrived in the world of autism. I had no idea what that word meant. I still don't. I know everything underneath autism. I know the causes, the conditions. I know the combinations of things that happened. I know about brain inflammation and gut inflammation. I know about all those things. So I found you over 10 years ago in my own personal search, and there you were, just waiting for me. And I couldn't believe what I found. I found families suffering in ways I could not understand. I found children suffering that nobody knew about. And I could connect your dots to my dots. And as I did that, I took the work that I do in the world and I started mapping all these different pieces. I started finding the stories. I started telling the stories. I started meeting the parents and the children. And my world changed forever. And it was an unbelievable moment when I realized that autism to Alzheimer's was all the same trajectory. This is all the suffering happening in our little children right now. And it has to be stopped right now. And I stand here at this place with this Capitol building behind me, with all the senators and the Congress people inside. But I'll tell you, they do not have the power. The power is not in there, it's right here. It is so right here. Your stories, because of this horrific SB277, your stories are coming to light in ways that are unbelievable. I've had texts this morning from all across the country and from Morocco and Malaysia saying, what's going on? What's going on? All eyes are here right now because our job right now is to take this down. Two short stories. Yesterday, Bobby Kennedy spoke at the Commonwealth Club of California in San Francisco to over 100 people in that room, standing ovation. And press and media came. He had 7 media interviews. Media that hasn't been speaking to him. They came to speak to him. And there's a mom who has completely recovered her son from very severe autism, sitting right there. A woman in front of her is overhearing her and turns around and says, you need to listen to this speaker, indicating to her that she didn't know what she was talking about. At the end of his talk, which was unbelievably powerful, the woman in front of her turns around, looks at her and says, I'm very sorry, I had no idea. Wow, one person whose life will be changed forever, and that woman will go on and speak and on and on. The other person, I received a text this morning from a woman who's a farmer and a rancher up in Sonoma. They spoke to their congressperson the other day, and he said he's going to vote no on this bill because he has 2 children who've been affected by vaccines. This goes everywhere and goes deep. So the moms that I've spoken to, and so many are here, I'm capturing these stories because these stories have to come out. They're coming out. And this bill is bringing the outrage that's been underlying here for so long right to the surface. So when we leave here, we go back to our families, our communities, our town, absolutely strengthened by the power and the energy collected here today, which is unbelievable, because this will not happen. SB 277 will not happen. It will fail. Today, when somebody asks me if I have a vaccine-injured child, or if I have a child with autism, I look at them today, and years ago I said, no, I don't have an injured child. I don't have an autistic child. I don't even have a child. Today, I say, yes, I have an autistic family. And guess what? I have thousands of children that are my children. And thousands of parents that are my parents. And I will not stop, because I came from somewhere else to arrive in your world, and you brought me in, and you told me your truth. And it was my truth too. So thank you for your courage. Your courage today and all time is what's changing this right now. For California, for our families here, for our families across the entire country that are looking at you because you are courageous. Thank you.
Thank you, Christie Dames. We have two more speakers if you're curious. We have Michelle Ford next. Michelle is a happily married mother of 5, the eldest of whom suffered some minor vaccine injuries. She is a health insurance broker in Southern California and the founder of the nonprofit Vaccine Injury Awareness League, VILE for short, which aims to educate her fellow citizens about the prevalence and atrocities of vaccine injury. She has independently studied vaccine injuries since 2004. In addition to her vaccine-related advocacy efforts, she also serves her community through her involvement with the Culver City chapter of the National Exchange Club, whose mission is the prevention of child abuse. She just completed her term as president of her local chapter. I met Michelle during the fight against AB 2109. After I spoke there, this woman came up and gave me a hug and said, "Just wanted to meet you, and now I have to race back to the airport in time to pick up my kids in Los Angeles from school." So she is just a dedicated advocate. She's up here again from Southern California, fighting for our rights. Let's give Michelle a warm welcome.
Wow, hi everybody. So I don't normally have this sexy voice. I've been doing a lot of talking, but I'm so honored to be with you today. So thank you for this opportunity. Although the circumstances that have brought us together leave very much to be desired, I think it's important to note that SB 277 has definitely awoken a sleeping giant. So for that, I am very grateful. I've made some of the best new friends that I know will be friends for life in this mission, so thank you. I'm honored to create a new realm of possibility with you today. In order to do that, however, I would like to take a walk down memory lane for just a moment. In this year, Oprah Winfrey's talk show went national. In the same year, Geraldo Rivera gripped the nation with the much anticipated and heavily disappointing televised opening of the Al Capone's vaults. We Are the World was the #1 song. Out of Africa won Best Picture. The world watched as Russia lived through the horrendous and very frightening nuclear accident at Chernobyl. The Space Shuttle Challenger exploded after takeoff at Cape Canaveral, Florida, and all 7 of our dear astronauts were killed. Our nation was stunned. It was also in this year that the Supreme Court upheld and reaffirmed abortion rights. This was the first year that Dr. Martin Luther King was honored with a national holiday. Lastly, the first ever genetically engineered vaccine for hepatitis B gained FDA approval. So what year was this?
1985.
Close. It was 1986. Another thing that happened in 1986 that didn't seem to get much, if any, attention was the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. And as many of us already know, this egregious law indemnified our vaccine makers. It also indemnified the doctors who provide vaccines and it indemnified our government. This law helped to increase the profits of the vaccine makers. No one was ever to be blamed anymore after that law was passed. Instead, they passed the liability on to the consumers by adding a 75-cent tax onto each dose. It also mandated a very biased and difficult to navigate vaccine injury court system. To date, this vaccine injury compensation program has paid out over $3.1 billion for vaccine injuries, including 83 verified cases of autism. This must have been a wake-up call for them, however, because in short order, they introduced a mantra. The mantra is that there is no link between vaccines and autism. Give me a break. So let's just imagine for a moment, stick with me here. Imagine for a moment what our lives today would be like if this law had never passed. First of all, we wouldn't be here today protecting what little rights we have left. But even bigger than that, we would have doctors that are conscientious, providing patient care that is based on individual needs instead of a one-size-fits-all mandate. We would have talented researchers and doctors that are still allowed to question science. We would have doctors that are not in fear of losing their credibility or their licensure or their livelihoods for being committed to this quality care. It would still be okay to ask questions. We would also have several million children, young adults, and adults living without autism, ADD, ADHD, tics, encephalopathy, lupus, Tourette's, autoimmune disease, gut problems, health, helmets, panic disorder, noise-canceling earphones, eczema, crossed eyes, insomnia, prescription drug dependency, wheelchairs, diapers, seizures, cancer, and this is not an all-inclusive list. I could go on and on and on. Additionally, the pharmaceutical industry would not be boasting year after year about sales, vaccine sales in the tens of billions of dollars annually, all on the backs of our sick citizens, paid for by their largest consumer, our own federal government. We would not have the highest infant mortality rate in the developed world. Drug makers might even make safe products. Now fancy that. We must raise the flag of unity today and of hope alongside our fellow citizens and continue to educate. This is just the beginning. We must educate them in every school, in every city, in every county, and in every state. We are fighting for the rights, even of our staunchly pro-vax and pro-pharma neighbors, friends, and family. They just don't know that we're fighting for them too yet. One day, they will thank you for your vision, for your courage, and for your foresight. As a nation, we've made mistakes before. We have course corrected. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come to stand against this atrocity and stand for our future, and we can do this. When our founding fathers created the Declaration of Independence, there was not a chance in hell that they would successfully ever sever the ties with Great Britain, but they did. When Martin Luther King marched for equality, there was no general belief at the time that he would succeed and that equality would prevail. But indeed, my friends, it has prevailed. When the suffragettes demanded the right to vote, there was no probability in sight that they would succeed, but in fact, they did too. There was no chance for peace in South Africa, or that there would be an end to the 46 years of government-supported apartheid, but because of Nelson Mandela, it did. There is peace there. There is no acceptable number of vaccine injuries to justify this madness. With almost 300 new vaccines in the pipeline, the time is now to take action, and I don't mean on the defense. Today I mean on the offense, my friends. We are the voters. We are the 99%. I want you to know that regardless of what happens in that hearing today or next week or the week after, I propose that we take on repealing the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. I thought I was going to have to repeat that, but clearly you got it. It starts with voting in the right candidates. It also means voting out. Voting out the ones in these hearings that do not support parental rights. The sooner that we accomplish this mission, the sooner we will spare the lives of countless children. The time is now to reclaim our God-given rights as citizens of a great nation. I still believe in America. I still believe in the right to the pursuit of liberty, life, and happiness. And I'll leave you with this. As Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
Hopefully they heard that in there. Nice work. Our final speaker is Landon Amonette. Landon is a loving husband, a father of 2 amazing little miracles, and a doctor of chiropractic. He devotes the majority of his time, when he is not in full-time practice, working to maintain the personal belief exemption to vaccination as a facilitator for the grassroots organization YourFamilyYourChoice.org. He is a proud member of the California Chiropractic Association, the International Chiropractic Association, and the California Coalition of Health Choice. I introduce Landon Amonette.
Well, I always wanted a standing ovation. I had no idea what was going to happen after everybody chanting, "Kill the bill." But I liked it. So I'd like your permission to tell you a little story. Can I have your permission? Yeah. The year was 1853. A mandatory vaccination law in the UK was developed as a response to an outbreak of smallpox. Parents were required by law to have their children from the newly born on up vaccinated in the name of public safety. However, a significant percentage of the populace objected to the law. They considered the law a violation of their rights as a free people, a violation of their ability to protect their children from a procedure that had documented evidence of significant side effects such as disability and death. Parents were fined and thrown in jail for their opposition. But they did not waver. They did not grow tired. They did not give up. They came together. And because they came together after 43 years of civil disobedience in the name of parental rights and personal freedom, they were granted a conscientious exemption to the mandatory vaccination for their children. Now, even with the new clause, many parents were rigorously cross-examined and bullied into vaccinating their children. Sound familiar? But opposition to the law grew. And as that opposition to the law grew, eventually the people were able to repeal that mandatory vaccine law. They repealed that law because they came together. They did not grow tired. They did not waver in their convictions to maintain the ability to make medical decisions for their children. And that is what we must do today. You know, how history repeats itself. Different continents, yes, definitely. But the world is a small place. Today we have legislation that threatens and attempts to violate our parental rights. Now, I use these words threatens and attempts very specifically here. I use these words because as sure as I stand before you today with God as my witness, I will not grow tired. I will not give up. I will conscientiously object to the forced vaccination of my children and any child, today, tomorrow, and any day, as long as it takes, because we must! Testing. Can you hear me out there? I have this to say to our legislators, with all due respect. If you desire your child to receive the currently recommended schedule of 69 doses of 16 different vaccines before the age of 18, and any future vaccine recommended by the department, well then that is your choice. I learned how to turn it back on. And if you, they're trying to silence me, I'm telling you. And if you as a parent, if you decide that you want your child to have an alternative schedule. Okay. If you desire that you want your child to have an alternative schedule, to have the same vaccines given to your child over an extended period of time, that too is... And if you as a parent, Doug, how about now? Don't freak out. And if you as a parent, if you decide that you want many of the vaccines for your child, but you want to opt out of maybe 2 or 3 of those vaccines, that is too your choice. And if you want one vaccine for your child, that is your choice. And if you conscientiously object to any or all vaccines based on your personal belief, no matter what that personal belief is, that too is your choice. And I say this to all of you. Look around you. We are significant. We are significant. We have come together, and our opposition will be heard. And you all have a choice also. You have the choice to make a difference. I thank you for being here and choosing to make a difference. I hope that you continue to do so. Parents must maintain the ability to make medical decisions concerning their children. Go see your legislators today. Talk to them. You are their constituents. You are their boss. We can do this. Your family, your choice. Your family, your choice.
That's right. Our family, our choice. Thank you, Landon, for that powerful speech. So it is just a little after noon right now. The hearing begins at 1:30. Security will take a little bit of time to get through since there are so many people probably from both sides. So what I would recommend is grabbing a bite to eat, using the facilities, and then hustling right on in to make sure that our side fills up the seats in the hearing room.